It's morning. The daylight exposes the full horror. Bodies are strewn all over, some alive, some dead. The leftovers from the hasty evacuation. Jakob sits in the mud staring straight ahead. He must find Bluma. It's the only thing on his mind. First, he needs to find bandages for his feet. He heads for the infirmary. "What's happening?" one of the men groans from his bed as Jakob starts wrapping bandages on his swollen feet. "The Russians," Jakob says. "Been and gone again. The Germans have fled. There are a few hundred prisoners still here." "Where are you going?" asks the guy. "To find my wife and children." Roughly 2 miles away at subcamp D825, Ron Smith, a lance corporal in the British Army, stirs awake from what feels like a deep, heavy sleep. He'd been captured in the Middle East, transferred to Italy, and then on to Poland. There had been an evacuation of POWs, but they'd kept Ron behind to finish some work in the chemical factory. Then his own side bombed it, and that's when everything went black, as the rubble came down on him. There isn't a German in sight as Ron steps into the mess hall, still half expecting someone to bark an order at him. Instead, he's met with an eerie silence. He discovers the crate of Red Cross parcels, tears one open and devours bread and jam. Then he heads into the grass square, the same place where the Germans let the POWs play football on Sundays. Their only day free from factory labor. 12 hours a day, 6 days a week in the chemical plant or hauling freight. A wrong move earned a beating. Some men never got back up. Most of the guards were regular Wehrmacht soldiers, not SS. They could be brutal when they wanted to be, but not sadists, at least not until the bombing started. Once the sirens rang out, the Germans turned into vicious, unpredictable, terrified men. Ron had always known something evil was happening in the main camp. Every day, gunshots cracked through the air. Smoke drifted over the wire from the crematorium chimneys. Sweet, chemical, and sickening. The smell of death. Sometimes he'd see the civilian prisoners at the chemical factory or digging trenches, tattered men wearing striped rags, skulls wrapped in pale skin, moving on legs with no meat on them. At the chemical factory, he'd worked for a few days on and off beside a Polish Jew. The Nazis had taken everything from her, thrown her on a train and separated her from her husband and children. She told Ron she didn't expect them to still be alive. It was the first time that Ron had ever seen a hollowed-out human. For the Jews, the future doesn't exist, she said. All that remains are memories. Ron takes one last look around the camp, slings a rucksack over his shoulder, and steps through the open gate. No guards, no dogs, just the crunch of snow underfoot. A few hundred yards away, he reaches a vast open field. A ditch hundreds of feet long, 10 feet deep, packed with corpses tangled together. Hundreds, thousands, arms and legs tangled together like a mass of broken dolls. Snow settles on them, gently making the horror seem unreal. He stares, breath caught. There have to be survivors, and Ron sets out to find them. Jakob can see Russians on horseback, Sten guns in hand, surveying the sea of bodies. Behind them, a young Polish boy drags a cow by a rope. Jakob, who's been trying to tend to the sick with a German political prisoner, has built a large fire using wood from the huts. The German political says he hates Hitler. He is anti-fascist, but he is still German, so the others treat him with suspicion. Still, since he ate better than most, he is strong and he builds a good fireplace. Jakob and some other men cut the cow's throat and butcher it. One of the Russians shout that they'll return later. The men eat slowly, pulling at the meat with their fingers. Some vomit, but the others learn to take tiny bites, afraid their bodies will reject too much too soon. Jakob's already seen men die from eating too much. An Englishman then appears with 2 Polish nurses. He says his name is Ron. He looks at Jakob's frail body and then at the corpses scattered across the yard, barely able to hide the shock and pity on his face. Everywhere there is death, but there is also hope. Across the compound, local Poles and Red Army soldiers have set up makeshift dormitory, blankets, food, and buckets of hot water. Nurses lift the most ravaged men and wash them gently. The first human touch they have felt in years. One man breaks down crying. By morning, half of them will be dead, but those who are strong begin to sing, voices cracking, trembling with disbelief. It's over. They're free. When Jakob has eaten what he can, he asks the Englishman his story. Captured abroad, 18 months in the camp. Football on Sundays, beatings, sure, but regular food and letters home. It makes Jakob angry that the Germans could show humanity to some, yet treat others like vermin just because their birth made them Jewish or Slavic. When Ron says he worked in the chemical factory, Jakob's ears prick up. "My wife," Jakob says. "She's a chemist at Bluma." Ron's face changes. These men are fragile. Hope is a weapon and should be handled with care. He tells Jakob he met her briefly, months before the Allied bombings, but he doesn't know where she is sent or if she survived. When he last saw her, she still had strength. "She talked a lot about you," Ron says. Jakob closed his eyes. He cannot speak. Ron stands. He has to go, but he promises to look for her. If he can find her, it might lead him to the kids. He'll speak to the Russians to try to track down the Poles who worked at the factory and make inquiries. He'll be back in the morning. Jakob fights back tears, nodding softly, almost daring to believe his family might still exist. "Jakob!" Elias shouts from across the yard, just as Ron walks away. Ron turns briefly stunned by this man's cheerfulness in a place filled with corpses. Elias looks more alive now than he ever did under the Germans, thriving in the chaos. He's gathered a gang of inmates from different nations, each one carrying sacks stuffed with tins, fruit, meat, fish, and lard. Elias swaggers up to the men at the fire. "Can I interest you in something?" he asks. "Fruit, vitamin C, Jakob. Kick all that sickness out of your blood." He snaps his fingers. "Or what about a gun? Partisans are everywhere, dangerous to be walking around unarmed." No response. "And what about your beautiful wife Bluma?" Elias asks, needling, smiling as dead bodies on stretchers slide past him. Jakob doesn't look up. He knows exactly what Elias is doing. Elias cannot be trusted. Elias shakes his head, scoffing. He and his little army move on, ready to make their fortune in the anarchy of the new black market. Jakob tries to stand, but the emotional weight hits him hard and sends him back down to the ground. When he wakes, he's in a bed in a room he doesn't recognize. Panic surges through him. A nurse hurries over and tries to steady him. A nurse tells him he's been out for 2 days, moved to a temporary hospital nearby. Ron. He needs Ron. He tries to sit up, but his body won't obey. Pain explodes in his feet. Heat and pain wash over him. Outside, he hears trucks, boots, and shouted orders. Chaos. "The Russians have set up transports," the nurse says. "But you'll need at least 2 weeks of treatment before you can go anywhere." Ron is returned to the camp the next morning just as he promised. But Jakob wasn't in any of the huts, and he wasn't in the infirmary either. Right now, Russians are shouting orders, loading the healthiest prisoners onto lorries, sending them to the train station, to who knows where. Ron tries speaking to some of them, boys really, but they don't understand English. They stare at him like they're seeing a ghost. A British soldier out of place, witnessing the brutality that they've been seeing for years on the Eastern Front. He needs to get out of Poland eventually, but right now it's too dangerous to go out alone. No one seems to know what's happening or who is in charge. He could try crossing into Germany, but he made a promise to Jakob and he'll keep it. A Polish engineer from the chemical plant had told him Bluma was transferred to another camp about 30 miles away, marched there on foot. The Russians have already liberated it. Ron decides he'll try to get there. After 20 days in the hospital, Jakob and the other recovering patients are packed onto lorries and driven to the nearby train station. They're told they're going to Krakow. Air raids and fire have turned the city and Poland into a graveyard. The streets are overflowing. People are selling anything they can lay their hands on. Smugglers, thieves, and bandits stalk in the darkness. It feels like the camps have emptied straight into the city. Jakob's been told to wait for a train that'll take him to a holding camp, but wait where? He has nowhere to sleep. It's not safe to lie down in the streets. Men freeze to death there at night. This doesn't feel like liberty, it feels like waiting to die. At least there's a field kitchen run by the Polish Red Cross. He ends up sitting with a Greek Jew and an Italian. Both men learn that there are camps set up for Greeks and camps for Italians, places they might be sent. But Jakob has no home to go back to. He is cold, exhausted, and starving, still wearing his striped uniform. Poland is crawling with bitter Russians and nervous Germans, and it's not safe to try to get back to Warsaw, not yet. Just then, Elias appears, dressed in a smart suit and a hat, his shoes polished. "Jakob, old pal!" He whistles over to one of his gang and tells him to bring some clothes so Jakob can change out of the striped uniform. All around are hopeless causes, and Elias is loving it. He tells Jakob that there are now civilian militias out there, German soldiers ready to fight to the death, crazy Russians who might shoot first and ask questions later. Jakob will need protection, and as luck would have it, Elias is heading to Warsaw and he'll take Jakob. He's heard it on good authority that Bluma could have been sent there. Jakob knows it's going to cost him. Elias doesn't do anything for nothing. So what does he really want? Jakob looks up at Elias and sees a grin creeping over his face. Ron never found Bluma in the camp. Instead, he was met with a wasteland. Pits of bodies and crematoriums the Nazis never had time to dismantle. The Russians are trying to sort prisoners by nationality, packing them onto trucks and trains, but most of the prisoners are too sick or too traumatized to know what to do. Hundreds of thousands of people are on the roads, sleeping in train stations, dying in the forests from exposure, clawing their way toward homes that might not exist anymore. Ron finds a group of English POWs that give him some Polish currency and offer him passage back to England. He refuses. Jakob's haggard face, Bluma's despair, it's all he's been able to think about. He keeps having nightmares, bodies haunting him as if he didn't do enough to stop all this horror. He travels with a Red Army convoy for a time. They pass what looks like a trail of the dead. Tens of thousands marched from the camps, dying en route, and just left there in the mud. Those who survived the hike were herded toward another camp to be executed, but the Soviets reached it first. They've converted the buildings into hospitals and holding stations overnight. Inside, Ron sees men and women strapped to beds, their bodies cut open, stitched, dissected, maybe medical experiments abandoned in panic. It's horror layered upon horror everywhere he looks. Outside, Red Army soldiers fire on men in forests. He sees groups of soldiers dragging women behind collapsed walls. Nobody stops them. Surely, by now, the British and the Americans must be near the western camps. But Ron isn't willing to cross the country alone, not yet. Instead, he convinces a Soviet officer to take him to a special camp the Russians have set up for the SS, Gestapo, and other Nazi personnel. Someone there must know something about Bluma. After all, she is supposed to be a well-known scientist with a reputation. After hitching a ride on the back of a truck, he finds a low-ranking SS guard housed in a miserable shed, probably waiting to be shipped to Siberia. One look on the man's face tells Ron the truth. That is a one-way journey. Yes, the guard knew Bluma. Reluctantly, probably under threat, he says that she had an important role at the chemical factory, and yes, he claims he knows where she is now, but he'll need freedom if he's going to take Ron there. Ron recognizes a bribe when he hears one. He takes a risk anyway. He calls England through a Soviet command post, telling his superiors about the famous chemist and her husband. Propaganda gold that could lift morale back home. Against all odds, he secures the Germans' release. Elias, 3 of his armed goons, and Jakob enter what's left of Warsaw. The city is almost entirely in ruins, over 85% of it destroyed. Whole districts are nothing but skeletal chimneys and collapsed cellars. The outlines of streets buried under mountains of brick and plaster. Nothing stands straight. Nothing is whole. A city once vibrant with cafes and theaters is now a huge cemetery. Russian soldiers swarm everywhere. Tanks grind through the wreckage, smashing anything in their path. Machine gun bursts echo through the streets. Drunken Red Army soldiers stagger down avenues clutching stolen liquor bottles, laughing morbidly. Men damaged by the war. Jakob's home is gone, flattened. He stares at the ruins. Elias doesn't seem to notice, or just doesn't even care. He's only gone there because Jakob had pleaded. 5 years of war has twisted Elias into something awful. When one of his gang shortchanges him, he shoots him dead in the street like it's nothing at all. Gunfire is so common, the Russian soldiers in the distance barely even look up. Elias promises to reunite Jakob with his wife soon. But first, they need to make a detour. Jakob's mother, a patron of the arts, was born into old money. Like every other Jew, she was rounded up and sent to the ghetto after the Nazi invasion. Jakob has no idea what became of her. She once owned a beautiful townhouse in Żoliborz, prime real estate. Some of the first fighting in the Warsaw Uprising had erupted there, but unlike most of the city, Żoliborz still stands, its grand villas damaged but not pulverized. They walk through a park and past mansions with broken windows. Young Russian soldiers run out of the houses, sacks slung over their backs, candlesticks and paintings spilling out. From upstairs windows, Jakob hears screaming, punctuated by gunshots. Men in fur hats peer through velvet curtains, guilt written over their faces. 5 local men struggle to carry a grand piano down a flight of stairs, but not Russians, just scavengers. Jakob stops at the house he grew up in. The statue of a dancing cherub still in the garden. The hedgerows now overgrown. One of Elias's men goes first. They look around for Russians. The Red Army might have liberated them, but right now it's every man for himself. The house has been ransacked, chandeliers taken down, paintings missing from the wall. Even the chairs and tables are missing. Elias pushes Jakob into the back, pointing to the stairs that lead to the basement. Jakob asks how Elias knows so much about him. He's reminded that Bluma is famous, that Jakob's own mother was well known to the SS, and Elias, well, he had German connections at the camp. Originally, the plan had been to extract the information in the camp on the threat of extermination, but that all changed when the bombs started falling. Jakob knows what they want. The safe in the basement, that's where his mom stored most of her jewelry, cash, and a bunch of bonds and letters that Jakob's father had sent to her when he was away at sea. Jakob crouches down in front of the safe, a gun now pointed squarely at his head. He remembers the combination. His father had chosen it. 25, 8, 20. The Battle of Warsaw, the date Poland had crushed the Red Army. Ron and the German get a lot of funny looks as they navigate the bombed-out streets to the camp where they'll supposedly find Bluma. The German wants Ron to know that he's never been on board with the executions. He was just following orders. Ron thinks to himself, a lot of guys are gonna say this. As they enter the camp, this one designed for extermination, bodies lay mangled in huge piles. A few Red Army soldiers are hanging around, but most of the prisoners are gone. The German tells Ron that Bluma was in the hospital when he was last there. Ron convinces a Russian who speaks very little English to let him into the infirmary hut. The Russian shakes his head as if there's no point, and then just waves him in, his eyes stalking the German. Rows of beds are empty, the smell of decomposition is filling the men's nostrils, the dirty sheets stained with the liquids of putrefaction and blood, vomit, and feces. It's empty, there's no one inside. The Russian gestures to a large stone building. Inside, a long line of crematoria furnaces reveal how rushed the last days were. There are dead bodies rotting, piled up. As Ron opens the furnace doors, he sees bone fragments, parts of skulls, melted fat congealed on brick. A space at the end must have been where the bone crushing happened. Ash for landfill on marshes, dumped into the rivers or ponds. In the corner is a pile of valuables, mostly rings. The victims must have hidden them, maybe sewn them into their coat linings, maybe swallowed them. Ron picks up rings one by one until he comes to one with an engraving on the inside. Jakob and Bluma, 1931. Jakob removes jewelry and cash from the safe. He closes his eyes for a moment, thinking of his family. "She's dead, isn't she?" asks Jakob. Behind him, Elias grins. "Don't worry, you'll be with them soon." Elias raises his gun. Jakob takes a deep breath. A gunshot cracks around the basement. Elias falls on top of Jakob. 2 more shots. Jakob shoves Elias's body aside, dizzy, ears ringing. He can't tell where the gunfire's coming from. 2 of Elias's men writhe on the floor, blood spreading across the stone. Then he sees them, 5 boys, no older than his own son. Thin, wild-eyed, clothes hanging off their bones, each holding a gun far too big for them. "I'm Polish," Jakob says softly. "This is—" One boy, face blank, shoots Jakob twice in the chest. For a moment, he just stares into Jakob's eyes, almost curious. Then the boys scoop up the valuables and disappear, their footsteps quick on the stairs. Jakob gasps as the blood pools around him. The staccato of machine gun fire outside is the last thing he hears. You've seen what happened after the Nazi camps were finally shut down. But some prisoners didn't wait for liberation. Watch Escaping the Nazi Death Camp to see the unbelievable stories of those who fought their way out, or click on this video instead.